Hey guys, welcome back. We are looking at the aftermath of the feeding of the 5,000, which really is an important part of that story. I don't want you to miss it. Listen in today.
Welcome to Everyday Truth with Kurt Skelly. We believe the Bible is true and relevant to everyone, everywhere, every day. If today's conversation is a help to you, take a moment to leave a review or share it with a friend. Thanks for listening. Now, let's join Kurt for today's episode.
Hey friends, welcome back to today's episode. We are still in Matthew 14, and we're still talking about that great event in the ministry of Jesus called the feeding of the 5,000. And I mentioned to you yesterday that this miracle is much deeper than we typically give it credit for. So if you think that the miracle is simply about people being fed, then you're missing the miracle. In fact, the people on that day thought that the miracle was just about them being fed, because the next day they showed up in Capernaum. This same crowd, many of the same crowd, showed up in Capernaum where Jesus happened to be at the synagogue, and they expected him to feed them again. So Jesus did not come to this earth to feed people. Now, he did that at strategic times. He didn't come to heal people. And again, he did that at strategic times. But the miracles of Jesus were not meant to be anything other than exclamation points on his message. So it's the message of Christ that was important. Why? Because the message of Christ was the mission, that I am come to seek and to save that which was lost. And these miracles in various ways demonstrated the authenticity of his ministry and the identity, his identity as the Messiah and as the Son of God. In fact, that's why John specifically chose the miracles he did in the book of John, including the feeding of the 5,000 in John 6, to demonstrate that very truth, that Jesus is the Son of God, that Jesus is the Messiah, and we ought to believe on him. Now, understand that on the day that Jesus fed the 5,000, the groundswell of people on that day wanted to make Jesus their king. They wanted to anoint him their king. I mean, just as, well, you can imagine. I mean, there's 15,000 people there. This is our king. He's done this miracle. We want him. We're ready to depose Rome and throw down the Herods and set up a capital in Jerusalem. I mean, they were ready. They thought, this is that prophet. This is our king. And Jesus, the Bible says, had to dismiss the disciples because they were getting wrapped up in this Messianic fervor. This was not Jesus' time, and they weren't entirely understanding who he was. And Jesus dismissed the disciples into a boat. He dispersed the crowd, and then we'll pick it up here in verse number 22. And straightway, Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him unto the other side while he sent the multitude away. So the disciples were getting kind of wrapped up in this. So Jesus said, no, you guys just go. He put them in the boat. And remember, they had all traveled there together that morning, Jesus and the disciples. Now he's going to send them away in a boat. Well, how is Jesus going to meet them on the other side? They're probably thinking, well, I guess he'll have to walk. But as Jesus put them in the boat, he then dismissed the crowd. But then the Bible says in verse number 23, and when he had sent the multitudes away, he, Jesus, went up into a mountain apart to pray. So, excuse me a moment. So remember, my phone is ringing here. You'd think I'd be a little bit more organized by shutting this stuff off. There we go. Remember that Jesus had gone there that morning to get apart, to rest. And probably part of that rest was to pray and spend time with the Father. Well, all day long he's been interrupted. All day long he's been healing and feeding and clarifying and all of that, right? Organizing. Now the disciples are gone. The crowd is gone. He's by himself. What a perfect time to get needed shut-eye. What a perfect time just to relax. And yet what does Jesus do? He goes into a mountain apart and he prays. Wow, what priority. And it says here in verse number 23, and when the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves. The wind was contrary. I've been on the Sea of Galilee at times when storms have brewed up quickly. And I'm here to tell you that even though it's relatively just a lake, the Sea of Galilee, because of its proximity, elevationally, it's 600 feet below sea level because it's surrounded by cliffs and the wind, strong east wind, can come down unpredictably. Those waves can really capsize a smaller fishing boat. So this is real. These disciples struggling here in this storm. And the Bible says in verse number 25, and in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. So the famous story of Jesus walking on the water. A couple details, though, that I hope you didn't miss. First of all, he saw them on that sea. We see that in the parallel passage. So even that's miraculous because we're talking about the middle of the night. The fourth watch of the night would be the hours between 3 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the morning. So we're talking about the dead part of the night. Have you ever been on a road trip and you were the one that had to drive at 3 o'clock in the morning? That's when the head's bobbing. That's when you are falling asleep. And so here's Jesus in the middle of the night. He's been praying all night long. He sees those disciples in this storm, and they're struggling against the winds and the waves. They're not making any progress. And Jesus wants to calm their fears. Jesus wants to go to them in their storm. And so he walks on the water. What a God we serve. And it says in verse number 26, and when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a spirit, it's a ghost. And they cried out for fear. So interesting. The very thing that Jesus did to calm their fear, to assuage their fear, to fertilize their faith, is what caused them to fear and what's caused them to doubt. To doubt means to be divided in their thinking. That's what's happening. I wonder sometimes if that doesn't happen in my life and in yours, that Jesus, he wants to come to us. He wants us to sense his presence in the storms of our life. But sometimes we become increasingly more afraid. So watch what Jesus does. Verse number 26. So they saw him. They said, it's a spirit. They cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, be of good cheer. Ready? It is I. Be not afraid. So when Jesus spoke to their fear and the amelioration of their fear, the assuaging of their fear, he didn't say, don't be of good cheer, the storm is going to go away. Or, hey, be of good cheer, the boat is strong. Or be of good cheer, the daylight's coming soon. No, he didn't tell them to be of good cheer because the circumstances had changed. In fact, when he told them to be of good cheer, they were right in the middle of the same storm. As a matter of fact, the only difference now is the word of Jesus, be of good cheer, and the presence of Jesus, it is I. And that's enough to change your attitude. So be of good cheer, it is I. Be not afraid. You understand that faith really is an awareness of the presence of God in our life. And courage comes as a result of a firm understanding that it is Jesus right there in our storm. He is present and real. I think all throughout the Bible, how the calming of the fear relates to the acknowledgement of his presence. So, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, the psalmist said, David said. Why? For thou art with me. Thou art with me. God said to Joshua, as I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. Be strong and of a good courage. Do you see that? So fear is not the faith is not the absence, and courage is not the absence of the storm or the valley or whatever the situation is, but it's rather an acknowledgement of the presence of God, right? So I will never leave thee nor forsake thee, so that we may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. That's what the writer of Hebrews said, and that's what we need. So it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered and said, Lord, if it be thou. Now, this is not Peter doubting, like, well, if it's you, Lord, I'm not sure. No, the grammar of this is, since it is you, we would say today, because this is you, Lord, then tell me to come. So Peter is really acknowledging what Jesus just said. Jesus said, it is I. And Peter said, well, because it is you, then you tell me to come. So think about the boldness. Not it is you, well, then come closer to me. No. Peter acknowledged the presence of Jesus. He believed in the presence of Jesus. And based upon the presence of Jesus, he said, okay, instead of being afraid in the boat in the storm, I'm going to be unafraid out of the boat in the storm. Wow, what a measure of faith that is. What a measure of courage that is. Peter got it, at least in that moment. And it says in verse number 28, so Peter said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. What an audacious request. And he said, Jesus did, come. Just a one-word beckoning, come, come. That's all he needed was one word from Jesus. And when Peter was come out of the ship, meant he walked on water to go to Jesus. Now, I think Peter gets a bad rap. No one else stepped out of the boat. No one else walked on the water. No one else said, because it's you, tell me to come to you. But Peter did. But we do receive a lesson in this, don't we? You know it already, but look at verse number 30. But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid. And beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? It's like that man at the base of the Mount of Transfiguration. Lord, I believe. Help thou mine unbelief. And here's Peter. Boy, in the moment, he recognized the presence of Jesus. He took those steps of faith, and then he got his eyes off of Jesus and onto the storm. And Jesus said, see that? How quickly we lose our focus. And maybe that's you today. Maybe how quickly today you've lost your focus. And it's just time to recapture that faithful view of Jesus. So we'll stop right there in verse number 31. We'll come back to the very end of the chapter next episode. I do hope you'll join us for that. Until then, God bless you, my friends.